Well, as we move on through the book of the letter of James, we're remembering that this book is a collection of wisdom, generally attributed to the church community in Jerusalem, and during the time when Jesus' brother James was in leadership. And what we've been seeing as we've been reading along is that this letter is dedicated to practical matters in finding wisdom's application to life in the real world. Note that last week, James puts a lot of emphasis on the power of words. In this next section, he notes that even after all that, even if you say all the right things, you still have to follow it up with action. Reading in chapter 3 and 4. Do you want to be counted as wise? To build a reputation for wisdom? Well, here's what you do. Live well, live wisely, live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. Mean-spirited ambition is not wisdom. Boasting that you are wise is not wisdom. Twisting the truth to make yourselves sound wise isn't wisdom. It's the furthest thing from wisdom. It's animal cunning, devilish plotting. Whenever you're trying to look better than others or get the better of others, things fall apart and everyone ends up at the other's throats. Real wisdom, God's wisdom, begins with a holy life, is characterized by getting along with others. It is gentle and reasonable, willing to yield, overflowing with mercy and blessing, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. You can develop a healthy, robust community that lives right with God and enjoys its results only if you do the hard work of getting along with each other, treating each other with dignity and honor. A harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. Where do you think all of these appalling wars and quarrels come from? Do you think they just happen? Think again. They come about because you want your own way and fight for it deep inside yourselves. You lust for what you don't have. You're willing to kill to get it. You want what isn't yours and risk violence to get your hands on it. You wouldn't think of just asking God for it, would you? And why not? Because you know you'd be asking for what you have no right to. You are spoiled children, each wanting your own way. You are cheating on God. If all you want is your own way, flirting with the world every chance you get, you end up enemies of God and God's way. And you suppose God doesn't care? The proverb says that God is longing for the Spirit to come alive in you. And what God gives in love is far better than anything else you'll find. It's common knowledge that God goes against the willful proud. God gives grace to the willing humble. So let God work in you. Yell a loud no to the devil and watch him make himself scarce. Say a quiet yes to God, who will be there in no time. Quit dabbling in sin. Purify your inner life. Quit playing the field. Hit bottom, cry your eyes out. The fun and games are over. Get serious, really serious. Get down on your knees. It's the only way to get back on your feet. Don't bad-mouth each other, friends. It's God's word, God's message, God's law that takes a beating in that kind of talk. Remember how I said be quick to listen? You're supposed to be honoring the message, not writing graffiti all over it. Who do you think you are to meddle in the destiny of others? And now I have a word for those who brashly announce, today, at the latest tomorrow, we're off to such and such a city for a year. We're going to start a business and make a lot of money. You don't know the first thing about tomorrow. You are nothing but a wisp of fog, catching a brief bit of sun before disappearing. Instead, make it a habit to say, God willing, and if we're still alive, we'll do this or that. As it is, you are full of your grandiose selves. All such vaunting self-importance is evil. In fact, if you know the right thing to do and don't do it, that for you is evil. May God bless us with understanding of these words written so long ago. Well, by nature, I'm a competitive person. I like to play games, and ideally coming out the winner. I get far too invested in sports as a spectator, get all wound up when I'm cheering for a particular outcome. I tell myself every 4 years, I'm not going to get caught up in the Olympics or the Paralympics. And then there I am, caring about sports and athletes I've never even heard of because they're on my Canadian team. I've got literally hours of Paralympic coverage taped to get invested in when I have time. Goalball or watch out. I'm fond of systems that rank from best to worst, from good to bad. I like to make decisions through comparison between activities, accomplishments, and even personalities. Which is better? Which is worse? When you see what others do, especially when you're engaged competitively in the same endeavor or pursuit, I tend to tell myself that it will sharpen my skills, simplify and amplify my determination and motivation, keep me engaged. And I'm always hoping that somehow I can come out on top, getting what I want. Now, I know I share this trait in common with the world around me. Success is defined by the winners in the world. I'm not the only one who likes to win. Our government decision makers are chosen through an electoral system of voting for winners. The economy is built on a competitive capitalist system. In this environment, with the possible exception of weight, I can't think of anyone whose goal is to lose. You never want to lose money, or lose a game, or lose a race, or lose a chance, lose one you love. Basically, losing is bad. And as such, I have been long fascinated by the Christian teaching that losing is not actually the worst fate, that a lot is to be gained by losing. Jesus said in many different ways, the last shall be first. And I wouldn't have articulated my fascination in this way as a child, although I know I had it, or so I thought, until I found on my bookshelf my very favorite novel from when I was 9 years old. It was called Out to Win, a baseball story. And then I found, on the same bookshelf, a short story that I wrote when I was probably 11 or 12. And it was called What a Way to Lose. And the story that I wrote was about a competitive swimmer who chooses to lose a race in order to help a competitor who's in trouble. So even as a child, I was very intrigued by this notion that there was something in my instinct for winning that might not garner the results the world promised and continues to promise. that it was somewhat of a broken truth. It seems clear to me that the early Christian community, led by James, also wrestled with this paradox. Because this section that we read of James begins by putting together wisdom with traits like gentleness, humility, and peacemaking. Wisdom from God is pure, peaceable, gentle, willing to yield. So that's the phrase that jumped out at me this week. Willing to yield, in the midst of all of that other stuff that James says. See, because conventional wisdom does not give a lot of value to yielding. Yielding is giving way to arguments, demands, or pressure. It's giving up. And giving up is for losers, for quitters, for cowards, for weaklings. To yield, we assume, means to be stepped on or stepped over, taken advantage of, misused, abused. I think the letter of James understands that and spends a great deal of time contrasting this way of thinking with wisdom that it says is of God. That's not how God works. That's not how Jesus' followers act. I think it's Brian McLaren who says, if we spend all our time riding up the escalator only to see Jesus riding down the escalator, why do you suppose that is? What value is there to be found in yielding? Well, in reality competition shows, you sometimes hear about people throwing a contest in order to achieve a result behind the scenes. Sometimes you hear of people deliberately not performing up to their potential in order to secure some goal outside of the competition arena. In another one, if you bet against yourself, for example. I was thinking about that, and on the one hand, those examples do illustrate that winning isn't the only way to get what you want, but somehow they don't feel like real examples of yielding, partly because it's about getting what you want. It's a dishonest way of winning. It's a manipulative way of maintaining control, and there's no actual yielding, right? So back to the question. What sort of yielding might James be talking about? So I thought, okay, let's think of this in simple terms. You let things go first on the street. When you get that triangle sign, you yield to other traffic. They go first. Well, why is that good? Prevents a crash between you and other vehicles. It does allow traffic to continue in the most efficient way possible without making people stop, including you, if it's not necessary. In a debate, you might yield your time or yield the floor to another person. You might concede or yield an election. Why is that good? It allows space for other perspectives, more than just yours. Makes other people feel like their ideas and thoughts and opinions are valued. It invites other people into the dialogue. We heard that in James, didn't we? James challenging his church to consider these kinds of things. He says things like, it's false wisdom that leads you to believe that you're better than other people and that you have nothing to learn. Refusing to win isn't complacency. It doesn't mean you're stopping trying to make the world better. It's actually the opposite. It moves you to a different kind of action. One of the greatest gifts of wisdom, he's saying, is its capacity to lead humans to peaceful resolution of conflict. What's that last phrase in this part of the letter? In fact, if you know the right thing to do and you don't do it, that for you amounts to evil. In this particular time in our world, 2021, I know that yielding feels like giving up. Feels like giving in to despair or giving in to what seems to us to be really stupid ideas that other people have. But what if? What if we allowed ourselves space to yield? What if yielding was the thing that we did? That it was the right thing to do? We don't have to let go of our passionate opinions. We don't have to change our minds about what we think is right. If we just yield, we can provide space for other perspectives. We can try it someone else's way for a while. We can let them go first. Will the world truly end if we let someone else control the remote control for an hour? Will the household cease to function if you pick up someone else's socks for them for the 80th time? Or take your turn more than once to feed the dog or unload the dishwasher? These may seem like frivolous examples, but you know the fights are real. And it extends to bigger things too. James says all of our fights, even our wars, come because we just can't let go of having things our way. I think it was social scientist Brené Brown who said, if you want to truly empathize with someone's experience, you must be willing to believe them as they see it, and not how you imagine their experience to be. And if we discover in the midst of our yielding that it turns out we were completely off base and we need to change our minds because we were the ones wrong, it's not nearly as embarrassing to admit that if we've given room for other ways of thinking. A yield sign is not a stop sign. You're not halted, you'll get your turn. And you might discover that what you thought was the road to a good life wasn't the right road after all. In our quest to be on top and win, you see, we miss what Jesus is doing on the ground. When we mistake a good life for the things that appear to be up on the top of that ladder, we build things like envy and selfishness right into our lives. When we cultivate wisdom, a good life sort of finds us. When we're busy trying to finish first, we don't see the people behind us. And sometimes that's where the things are going on. I suspect there are many stories like the one I'm ending with today, but I'm going to tell you about one that I saw, well, through the TV anyway. It was the semifinal of the men's 800-meter race at the Tokyo Olympics. Right near the finish line, the American Isaiah Jewett was about to clinch second place to go through when he became entangled with Botswana's Nigel Amos. And the two of them collapsed on the track, and all the other racers passed them to cross the finish line. So both of these two fantastic runners were out. Jewett helped Amos to his feet, slung his arm around his shoulder, and the two of them finished the race together. Jewett said afterwards, I got Nigel up too, because I could see that he was as devastated as me. He apologized to me right there, and I said, let's just finish the race, man. As they went to cross the line, Amos, who had been slightly behind when they fell, stepped back and let his competitor take the stride over the line first. After the race, Jewett said, at the end of the day, of course, I was super frustrated. He said, I was so mad because I felt I had a chance and instead I lost. But I learned from all those superhero animations I watched, regardless of how mad you are, you have to be a hero at the end of the day. And that was my version of trying to be that kind of hero. He won't regret that decision. Of that, I am confident. James would do one better. He would say they were wise. May God help us all be wise. Amen.